My name is Bonnie, and welcome to my very first ever knitting podcast. My channel is called A Knitter Obsessed here on YouTube. Um, and yeah, this is my very first one, so welcome. Thank you so much for joining. I have been thinking about starting one of these for a few months now. I love knitting. It is one of my most obsessive passions, hence the A Knitter Obsessed title. And I just find it so much fun. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of people in my life to talk to about it. My husband does the best he can with it. He's very supportive. He acts very interested. But for the most part, it's just me. And I've been watching a ton of these podcasts myself and just felt so inspired by them and just wanted more than anything to get more into this community and just be more of an active part in it and yeah, meet some friends, meet some fellow knitters, and talk about my projects, talk about what I'm passionate about. So that's the plan. I also have quite a few other hobbies. I tend to be a very obsessive person, so you will notice there's a ballet bar behind me. I do a lot of ballet. I teach ballet specifically to adults and teens who are getting into it a little bit later in life, which is a massive passion of mine. I think everybody should do ballet as well as knit. And I also do a lot of reading. I do a lot of D&D and mini painting, like a lot of very niche, diverse hobbies. So I will warn you ahead of time, some of those might sneak into this podcast if I'm feeling particularly obsessed with them at any given time. I'll try and keep that content towards the ends of videos, so that if you're only here for the knitting content, you can feel free to walk away at that point, which is totally okay. But I just want to give you fair warning. I also want to warn you, I'm looking at a screen over here to check when I'm in frame every now and then. So also my dog just hit the camera, so you might have seen the wobble. Sorry about that. But if I'm looking away from the screen here and there, I'm going to really try not to do that, but I'm sure I'll slip up. But that's what I'm looking at. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm in frame and that everything's in focus. And I'm hoping to get a better setup for next time. I just was running out of daylight and figured I should get this filmed now while I can. So it's a little suboptimal, but that's okay. I'm also going to structure this video a little different from how I plan to structure my future videos. So my plan is to do a pretty standard knitting podcast structure. So I'll start with finished objects, we'll move on to work in progress, and finish with acquisitions or future plans. And I plan to have one every 2 weeks. I think would probably be about the right pace for how fast I knit for it to be interesting. I'm hoping on the weeks in between I might be able to discuss some other topics and put out some different videos, but we'll kind of have to see how it goes. This is all, completely new to me. However, this time, because there's no timeline for, finished objects since the last episode, it's just finished objects, because I could start that timeline from anywhere. And so I think what I want to do is in a separate video. Maybe I'll release it next week or the week after, we'll see. I'd like to go over all of my finished objects for 2024 at that time. We'll just cover January and February and go through all of them in more detail. And I think that will be a more interesting way to do this. I think if I do all of my finished objects and then go into works in progress and everything I want to talk about, is going to be a really long first video. So I'm just going to split it into two and deal with it that way. And then going forward after that, we'll do a more standard podcast structure. That being said, I will talk about what I'm wearing just a little bit. This is my most recent finished object. So this is the Favorite Flannel by Alicia Plummer. It's knit with yarn from Hilltop Fiber Farms from Etsy, and it's from their Merino and Gotland hybrid sheep named Evie. It was very cool yarn. You get to know the name of the sheep that it came from. So it's a light DK. It had this very prominent thick and thin texture to it that made it a bit interesting to work with. But once I blocked it, it all just bloomed and filled up all of those gaps and ended up with a pretty impressively even fabric for how thick and thin it was. And I just absolutely love it. I love this yarn. I thought it was a joy to work with. I love this pattern. The fit is just, I'll stand up and you can see, but the fit is just perfect in my opinion. It was supposed to just be regular ribbing on the hem and the body ribbing, but this yarn, because of the thick and thin texture, it just was coming out really, really loose, no matter how far I went down with the needle sizes. And it just wasn't looking good. So I ended up doing full twisted rib. So knitting through the back loop and purling through the back loop for all of it. And it just gave it the structure that the yarn needed. I also did not get gauge. I was a little bit off. I was, I think, 1 stitch more for 4 inches than the pattern called for. But I did the math and it worked out that it was knitting at that gauge actually going to give me the slightly tighter fit that I wanted for this sweater. So I went ahead and went for it. And like I said, I love the fit. I think it's amazing. The only issue I have with this sweater is, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see, but the elbow is just a little bit stretched out and baggy. And so I'm thinking about going back in with just a little bit of elastic and threading it through so it'll hold the elbow just in a little bit. That being said, I've worn this sweater like 4 or 5 times already, and I think I finished it 2 weeks ago, so I'm very, very happy with it. It's super comfortable and really easy to wear. Highly recommend the pattern. Very well written, very easy to follow. And just a fun knit because it has this very slight texture in it. So you only do the texture every, I think, 4th row, and so you have 3 full rows, rounds of just plain stockinette, and then you have a really basic texture round, and it just keeps you engaged in a way that straight stockinette sometimes doesn't for me. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I highly recommend. But that's the only finished object I'll go through for now, and then we'll do a whole nother video with the rest of them, and it'll be great. So, for my whips, the first one I want to talk about is my blanket that I'm working on. So this is almost done. This will probably be done today. Sorry, I just realized I looked at the screen that entire sentence. I'm working on it. But this will probably be done today. But this is the Lovey blanket by Sandy Rossner. It's huge. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it in the screen. But all I need to do on it, I have 3 sides bound off. And I'm on the very last side. Oh, I lost a needle. That's okay. I'm on the very last side just to bind off. So that is all that's left. That being said, this bind off is taking me forever. It has this beautiful little mosaic knitting motif and then the sawtooth edging. And the sawtooth edging is just taking ages. It's beautiful and it's worth it. It is an absolute labor of love because this is going to a nephew that will be born in a couple of months, who I think deserves to have a very warm and cozy blanket. But yeah, labor of love for sure. It is a pain in the butt. This would have been done days ago if it was just a normal bind off. Especially, you start with this little rectangle in the center. You can see the edges, I think, where I picked up the stitches here. Oh, it's hard to see which way to go. Yeah, here. And then from that rectangle, you pick up stitches around, join in the round, and then you just, the blanket grows and grows and grows from there. And so it starts off feeling like a very quick knit, which I knew was deceptive when I started it. I knew it wasn't gonna last. But by the end, every round was taking like half an hour. So it's beautiful. I love it. This is a free pattern from Knit Picks. And I knit it with, I realized I didn't talk about the yarn. I knit it with Knit Picks Brava in the tweed base. I think the white is called hold on, I have some right here. I'm forgetting the names. The white is called Wren. It's all acrylic, but this is lovely, high quality acrylic. I am not a huge fan of working with acrylic. I find it quite slippery on my needles and just sort of has a weird hand feel to it when I'm knitting. But for baby items, I do like to make sure whatever I give them is very machine washable and very easy to take care of. So acrylic's always a good way to go. And then the blue on the outside is the color Heron. So it looks like that. Again, very lovely blue. The pattern had me buy 9 balls of the Wren, and I think I've used 6. I have a lot left over. So if anyone has any ideas for what to do with worsted weight oatmeal colored-ish tweedy acrylic, let me know. I'm on the look for some ways to get through some of these schemes. So, but that's my lovely blanket. That's been my focus lately. I've been trying to get it done. The baby shower that I'm planning to gift it for is at the end of next month, but I'd rather not push it too long, and I kind of want the needles back from this blanket for a future project that I'm very excited to cast on. So we're trying to finish it today, toss it in the washing machine, make sure it's all good to go, and then I can kind of move on with my life from this baby blanket. But I'm really happy with it. I recommend this pattern. Like I said, it's free, it's well written. There are a couple parts that I found a teensy bit confusing, but I was able to figure it out, and it was nothing too crazy. So I will say that my only complaint about it, and this is on me, I just didn't think about it, but I was like, oh, it's a garter stitch blanket. I love garter stitch. It's all knitting. And I was like, oh, it's knit in the round. I love knitting in the round because you're just always only knitting. Except those two effects cancel each other out. If you're doing garter stitch in the round, you are purling every other round. I just, for some reason, didn't think about it when I cast it on. And so it's a lot of purling. It's a little painful. Even though mosaic knitting is done with purling every round, my hands were getting tired. I do knit English style, so throwing, so the purling isn't that bad, but when you're talking about 600 stitches in a round with this chunkier than I usually work with yarn, it was starting to get to my hands a little bit. So love the pattern, just you gotta be mentally prepared for that when you cast it on. So that's my first one. My next work in progress is my Shift Cowl by Andrea Mowry. So I don't have a ton on this. It's still pretty small. So you can see it's a little triangle right now. Well, almost a triangle. There's the edge there. So yeah, this is an interesting construction. Here, I'll come in a little closer so you can see the colors. But basically you knit this sort of 5-sided piece of fabric, and you end up seaming it together so it makes a cowl, but the cowl looks like a sort of asymmetrical triangular scarf shawl, just without the ends. So I'm really excited for it. I feel like it'll be really easy to wear. Where I live, it's Northern California, so it tends to be chilly in the mornings, but then warm up throughout the day. We're a pretty moderate climate, so it's never super duper cold. So something like this where it's really easy to take on and off, and it's not too big, so you're not like lugging something around, is very helpful. I'm knitting this with 3 colors of spin cycle yarn, which is what the pattern recommends. So these are them. And the red is pretty red all the way through, but the other 2 have a lot of color variation in these balls. So the stripes should get very, very interesting as time goes on. I'm forgetting what the color names are off the top of my head. Hold on. I have Ravelry up on my iPad just for this question because I knew I would forget. So if I go to my projects and I go to the shift, these are in the colors Devilish Grin, Dream World, and Wololo. So I picked these up. I had to go on a business trip out to the East Coast recently, and I had a little bit of extra time before catching one of my flights, and so I stopped in a little yarn store. I don't remember what it was called. It was just on my way, but just kind of poked around, and they had a whole display of spin cycle yarns, which is something that my local yarn store doesn't have. And so I figured I would splurge a little. Those are a little bit more than I usually spend on yarn. A spin cycle is pretty pricey, but I figured it'd be fun. I'd been looking at this cowl for a while, and I am really enjoying knitting on it and seeing the color changes very slowly start to happen. So I'm really excited for this project. Yeah, like I said, it's been on the back burner while I've been working on my baby blanket recently. But I like having typically like 3 projects going at once. So I usually like having a small portable project, which would be the cowl right now, a medium-sized project, so probably like a sweater, and then one really big, very stationary project, so some sort of blanket. And that seems to work for me. I like to switch between them all. So that's my Shift by Andrea Mowry. My next project has been somewhat in a state of hibernation for a little while for reasons. So this is a leaf on it. Is my yoke for the Bibliophile 2 sweater by Alicia Plummer. So I tend to really like her patterns. I like her style quite a bit and the fit of them. I've only finished this one, but from the photos, I like the fit of most of her garments. And the thing is, so this is the finished yoke. It's completely done according to the pattern. And I don't know about you, but this is tiny. Like really tiny. So I knew when I started this, I had met stitch gauge almost perfectly with this yarn. But my real gauge was off. It was quite a bit more dense than the pattern called for. And I just figured it'd be fine. I was going to cast on anyways because I really wanted this sweater in this yarn, and I liked how dense the stitches I was getting were. Like, I liked that it was going to be just a nice, dense, warm sweater with the like way the fabric was knitting up. In hindsight, I maybe should have gone up a needle size and just seen where that put me. And in the pattern, it does say you can just knit a few rounds of plain stockinette before dividing for the sleeves, and it's going to be totally fine. The reason I stopped knitting is because I'm going to have to knit a lot of rounds of plain stockinette before dividing for the sleeves, and I'm just nervous that it's not going to work out. I just need to bite the bullet and go for it. It's worst come to worst, I just have to rip it out and start over anyways, which is what I'm worried about right now. So I'm not really sure where I'm dragging my feet, just figuring that out. This is, by the way, I realized I forgot to tell you, but knit in Nightshades by Harrisville Designs in the color Fever Dream. And I just love this yarn. It's like this dark purple, almost black, with these little bits of red in it. And it definitely feels very rustic. It's American Cormo wool grown in Montana. And it's got a lot of toothiness to it. It's got a lot of kind of grip. The yarn's kind of stretchy almost when you work with it. I don't know. It's interesting. But when I made the swatch, and after I washed the swatch, it made this really nice, it was still a very dense fabric, but it had good drape, it had good movement. And so I think if I can get this sweater finished, once I block it, it'll be beautiful and so nice to wear. It's a teensy bit scratchy when I hold it to my neck, but nothing crazy. And I'm not particularly sensitive to wool or anything, so I don't think it's going to be a problem. But yeah, I do love this yarn. To me, it kind of, when it knits up, makes me think of like cooling, like lava rock or something that just has like a little, the red knit just seems like it's still a little bit hot or something. I don't know, it's a little dorky, but that's what I think of when I look at it. So yeah, that's at some point soon I need to finish working on this sweater and just get it going and get separated for sleeves and just rolling. Because after that, it's all stockinette. The row gauge won't matter. I can totally just knit to the right length and it will be fine. So I need to stop dragging my feet. My other work in progress I don't actually have with me. I like to keep a project at work at my desk so I can work on it during my breaks. But I'm working on the Musselburgh hat. Musselburgh? I don't totally know how to say it, I'm sorry. But by, Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague. Very popular pattern. I'm sure everyone's heard of it. But I'm knitting that in Brooklyn Tweed Peary. It's not in this color. This is just the yarn that I'm using. So it's this exact same yarn, but it's in this color. And I lost the label for the red one probably 2 years ago. This yarn's been in my stash forever, and I was just trying to find a way to use it all up, which is why I went with this hack, so you can just keep knitting till you run out of yarn. So yeah, I don't actually know the color name, but it's this very beautiful deep red. So I'm excited to wear that hat. I find the pattern actually knitting it kind of boring. I'm gonna be really honest. It's just plain stockinette forever and ever and ever until you get a long tube. But it is perfect for work because I can just pick it up, put it down. It gets knit on at my lunch break, and that's pretty much it. And so it's just growing very, very slowly. So maybe next winter I'll have a Musselburgh hat, which would be great. And then I have one more. I technically would consider this project as hibernating, but it will become active as soon as I finish my Levy blanket. So I will talk about it because of that. But this is my hue shift afghan. This is another pattern. Do not have very much of it done, but this is another pattern by Knit Picks, and you make 100 of these little metered squares in 4 groups of 25 each, so 4 5x5 panels that you then seam together. And it's this beautiful gradient blanket that it creates. And my plan for this is actually to eventually knit 2 of these because I have 2 nieces, one who is 10 and the other who is, I believe, 6. I know that's mean that I don't know that. She's 6, yes. Sorry, I was doing some quick math in my head. They grow up so fast. I keep thinking she's so much younger than that. But yeah, they're just growing like crazy. But I put it on hold while I was working on my other blanket that had the actual timeline. And so we'll see. My dream would be to get both of those done by Christmas. It seems really ambitious because they're massive. But if I can get one done and then, you know, maybe get the other one done next year, I think that would be okay as well. But yeah, I basically, for this blanket, I have just this massive basket full of rainbow yarn to work my way through, which is, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to see this work up. And it's just mindless. Like, you can knit one of those squares so fast, and it does grow faster than expected. So yeah, that'll be a fun project. But like I said, it's been totally on hold right now. The whole thing is knit in Mighty Stitch, which is also from Knit Picks. It's worsted weight. It is 80% acrylic and 20% superwash wool. So I like, when I give gifts, for most people, I like to make sure that they are machine washable. Not everyone wants to take the time to deal with caring for natural fibers and all of that. So I try not to put that on most of the people that I gift for. So nice machine washable yarn. Should be a lot of fun. I think they'll both absolutely love them. So that will be back on my needles very soon. So that is all I have for works in progresses. I do have quite a few quantities of yarn that I just got recently, and I have pretty definite plans for all of them. I don't love to buy yarn without a plan for it, so I thought it would be fun to go through those. So the first thing, and this is the reason that I want to finish my Lovey blanket so bad, is that I want my size 8 needles back. Because I want to cast on the Wishbone sweater by, again, I'm sorry, I will come up with a better system next time than me just having to go through my iPad and Ravelry so much. I, in my head, thought I was just gonna remember all these things, but I would hate to get, anybody's names wrong or anything like that, so. Yeah, so this will become the Wishbone sweater by Veronica Lindberg. I'll pop up a picture if I'm able to figure out how. But I saw the pictures for this sweater and I was just obsessed with it. It's beautiful. Oh my gosh. And I saw it and I just immediately envisioned it in this just really deep red color. And so my plan is to hold these two yarns together. So this is Double Sunday in the color Deep Red. And this is Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in the color Claret. And for me, what I was picturing, the Double Sunday is a little too, it's not deep enough of a deep red for what I was picturing. But the Claret is a little too burgundy of a red for what I was picturing. So I was hoping if I held these together, it would actually be something perfectly in the middle, which would be the exact color that I want. And so I don't have a swatch to show, but I did knit up just a quick swatch on off gauge needles. I wasn't doing it for gauge, I was just checking the color, and I've already unraveled it, so I can't show it. But it is exactly the color that I was picturing. I'm so excited. It's perfect. They're close enough in color that there's no real marling or anything like that. But they just, the mohair tints the Double Sunday just right. And it's, oh my God, it's going to be stunning. I am so excited. And so the second I am done with this blanket, I am casting on for the Wishbone sweater. It is 100% next. And a lot of the times if I want to cast something on, I don't have the needles available. I use interchangeable needle sets, so I usually don't have a problem with taking the needles off one and borrowing them and putting them back. But I knew I wanted the Wishbone sweater so bad that if I cast it on, I would just never work on the Lovey blanket again. So I made myself finish the blanket, and I'm glad. It'll be good. It'll be all the way done. I won't have to worry about it, and it'll be a very loved gift, I hope. So yeah, I've been very impatiently waiting to cast the Wishbone sweater on. It should be on in a couple of days. It'll be on the needles very, very soon. So my next one is I have plans to knit The Poet by Sari Nordland, which is a beautiful 3/4 length lace sweater. And my plan for that is this Knitting for Olive merino in the color Plum Clay. And I am obsessed with this color. It is so odd. It's a completely different color depending on what lighting it is, as far as I can tell. Like, there are times when I look at this and I'm trying to see what on the screen, what it's coming out pretty purple, like a very muted, desaturated purple on the screen, I think. And a lot of the times that's what I see. I see it's definitely purple, but it's a very muted purple. It's not in your face. But there are some lights when I look at it and it's straight up brown. Like, there's no purple in it. That's just a brown yarn. A beautiful brown yarn. Don't get me wrong. There was one time I looked at it in certain lighting, I could have sworn it was a dark green. That makes no sense. I'm not sure how that's happening, but I love it. I think it's stunning. I think it will go really, really well with the lace in that pattern. I think it'll show it off really nicely. So I'm very excited for that. I'm a little intimidated by that pattern, if I'm being really honest. I think I'm dragging my feet a little bit. And I did knit a gauge swatch. It's actually soaking in a bowl of water right now to be pinned out. I meant to do it earlier today, but forgot about it. But I do know my gauge is super off. The gauge for this so it's fingering weight yarn, just a single strand, but the gauge is calling for like 21 or 22 stitches for every 4 inches. And I'm getting closer to 26 to 28 when I knit it. And I even went up a needle size, and I wouldn't want to go up another needle size. I think it would make way too loose of a fabric. So my plan is just to do the math and figure out at the gauge I am getting what size I should knit and just do it that way. Because yeah, otherwise I think it's going to be way too loose for the way that I knit or the way I want the garment to look. And the lace is already supposed to be pretty open, so I don't necessarily want the stockinette parts to be really gappy too. So I have a little bit of math to do on that, but it's definitely being knit in this yarn. I love it. So that'll be on the needles soon as well. My next acquisition is I got some skeins of the Pure Silk by Knitting for Olive in the color, what color is this? Plum Rose, which I've never worked with this yarn before. Knitting for Olive in general is pretty new to me. My yarn store just started carrying it pretty recently, so if I have a lot of it, that's why. It's a little bit exciting. And this is a little bit of an unusual color for me. I'm not a huge pink person necessarily, but I do just feel like this color, I felt like it suited me when I was in the store. It just seemed like it would make something very pretty and very special. And so my plan for this is to knit the Cumulus Tee by Petite Knit, I think. I was going back and forth on a few different projects. So it's not completely set in stone. I've never knit a Petite Knit project or pattern before. I know she's super popular. I'm assuming her patterns are great. But this would be my first one. So we'll see. This one isn't as high of a priority. I think it would be really cool. I know that summer's coming up. Like I said, we don't even have particularly cold winters here, so summer and warm weather is going to be here like way before I know it. And so it might be smart to get something like this on the needles instead of knitting a chunky mohair full cable knit sweater with the wishbone sweater, but I don't know. I'm just a little less excited about this right now. I've never knit a summer garment before. I'm very new to garment knitting in general. I just knit my first one, my first ones this year. So yeah, this will be on the needles soonish, but it might not be next. We'll see. Excited about it though. It feels very nice. So, and then my last one is my local yarn store had these skeins from, so Winter Sister wool, which is local to where I'm from. So these sheep were raised probably about an hour and a half drive from where I live, which I just think is very cool. The same as like when I knit this sweater and I knew the name of the sheep that it came from. There was a picture of the sheep. Like, I love stuff like that when it's, you know, it's local, you know, it's like a small farm and a small scale business, and it's just fun to support those kinds of things. So this is, it doesn't even say what type of wool it is. It just says local wool. It's pretty soft. Like, it definitely has a rustic feel to it, but it feels really soft. I grabbed 2 of these. It's a worsted weight. And this was the dark brown or light brown color. So it's a very desaturated light brown with almost sort of a gray pull to it. It's very twisty yarn. It has a lot of good texture. But my plan for this is to knit the cooler side of warm cowl. I think that would be a fun one. I think it looks really easy. to wear. Like it looks like there was a lot of, hold on, sorry, I'm trying to see who it's by. I don't want to talk about it and not give the designer credit. So yeah, The Cooler Side of Warm by Espasi Tricot. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Yeah, it looks like it'll just be really easy to wear. It looks, like I said, I look for winter accessories that are very easy to take on and off just because of the climate we live in. So that's the plan for these. It's a beautiful yarn. I could not resist. I did not go in there to purchase this. They had it by the register and I was like, yep, I'm getting it. So I'm excited for that, to cast that on. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, that's the plan. Those are everything coming up. It's a lot of knitting. So very exciting. I'm very excited for this podcast. For the future plans, just to go over that really quick, I obviously have my episode I was talking about for everything I've knit so far in 2024. I also think it would be fun to do an everything I've knit that I can remember video. It's not gonna be that many things because of the that I can remember caveat. I have been knitting most of my life. Actually, I guess I'll go into a little bit of backstory for me. So I learned to knit when I was probably 9 or 10. My Nana taught me. But she just taught me like the absolute basics. So she taught me knitting, purling, casting on, casting off. So I could make a long rectangle. So I did, you know, what every new knitter does, and I just made like a long skinny scarf that went on for miles. It never really ended. I don't think I ever finished it. I remember it was in this light blue, just slippery yarn. I was knitting on the wrong size needles. Like, it was never gonna be anything. And my Nana ended up having a stroke. She wasn't able to knit anymore, and I never practiced. And I kind of sort of forgot over the next couple of years. But when I was in 6th grade, so a couple of years later, we went on a field trip, and on that field trip, I don't remember where we even went. I just know there was a gift store and they had a klutz activity, you know, book and package that they used to sell for teaching yourself how to knit. And I was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna learn again. And to give you an idea of how long ago this was, I'm gonna age myself a little bit here, but one of the things you could knit was a cell phone holster. And it was a cell phone holster for like an old, like teeny tiny flip phone. And it would hook it to your belt with a little button and a button loop. Like, yes, it was very interesting. I did knit the cell phone holster in the same blue, like shiny yarn that I did for my long skinny scarf. So I had a lot of things in that color yarn. And fun fact, I did teach myself completely how to knit off of that book, but there were models in the book, and one of the models, I started dance, I think the next year I got into jazz dance before I did ballet, and my dance teacher was one of the models in the book, and I was like, no way. It was very funny. It was a very weird coincidence. So, but yes, this was all before YouTube and realizing that I could learn how to knit on the internet and all that stuff. So again, I knew very, very basic knitting. And it kind of went on the back burner again. Like, it just didn't, I loved it. I thought it was great, but it didn't really stick. And then I had a bit of a resurgence when I went to college. I picked it up again. I thought I would get really into shawl knitting for some reason. And then I learned that I hate shawl knitting because it takes forever. I have quite a few shawls that I do not wear because they're not my style. But that is all to say, it's clicked this time. I don't know what it is about this. I picked it back up about 6 months ago, and this time, after years of starting and stopping knitting, it's just making sense to me. Like, I'm finally picking yarns that work with my projects. I'm finally trying projects that excite me the whole way through. I'm finally knitting garments. I think that might be, honestly, the change. I was so afraid of garments for so long, and now all of a sudden they've clicked, they make sense, they're not scary. You know, sometimes they're challenging, but challenging doesn't mean scary. Challenging just means you might need to try it a couple of times before you get it. But like, oh my gosh, they're so much fun, and this is different than any other time I picked it up. Like, this time it's so rewarding in a way that it wasn't before, and I'm so much more excited to like really learn about it this time around. And I think possibly a big change too was finding the knitting podcasts on YouTube. They make it seem so much more approachable. It feels like you're part of a community. Yeah, it's just fantastic. I love it. This hobby is like everything to me right now. It's my whole life. So yeah, and I've been noticing especially the beginning of this year, it seems like there's quite a few new knitting podcasts popping up. It seems like other people are feeling the same way I'm feeling, which is just wanting to be a part of this community and wanting to add to the content and add to the conversations and add to the fun. And yeah, it's just super exciting. So anyways, that's my backstory. So there might be a everything I've knit that I can remember video, but like I said, it's gonna be very hit or miss. I have quite a few projects around, but I don't know what the pattern was. I don't know what the yarn was. I don't have any context for them because I didn't document anything, and it was very, flying by the seat of my pants there for a long time. But it could be a fun video. We'll see. And then I also, probably a very soon video, will be going through my plans and ideas and goals for the next year. So it's a little late in the year for that, but that's okay. And it doesn't even need to be like a calendar year. It could just be a year, maybe a year from that video. We'll see. But yeah, those are my plans. If you've been watching this whole time, thank you. I feel like this was a longer video than I meant to make, especially considering there were no finished objects. And if you watch this video at all, thank you. This is my first one. I'm so blessed that I'm so honored that you clicked on the video. That's amazing. But yeah, that's all I have for now. So thank you so much, and I will see you on the next video.